Hello Disney team, and welcome to our presentation for the Industrial Engineering Case Study Competition, the Hotel Redesign. First, let's meet the team.
My name is Riley.
My name is Blake.
I'm Elijah.
And I'm Brock.
So we're first going to start out by just reviewing some of the stuff we were given, our givens in the document. We wanted to make sure we fully understand this, as well as we went ahead and made some assumptions that will help us throughout the problem later. And I just want to point out some key ones here. One of the assumptions we made was that the average stay is 1 night. While the team here fully understands that's not realistic, we could not find hard, concrete data that would support any other assumption, nor were we given statistics from the hotel. So we assumed 1 night as maybe an overestimate, but that will assist us in minimizing wait times. And then the other thing I want to point out is that we also estimated some costs for the kiosk and the agents so that we could do a cost comparison to start out our deep dive into the problem, which is what I will talk about next. That is our price comparison. And we wanted to just look at this when we started to understand the difference between an agent and a kiosk. Looking at this graph, from our assumptions, about after the 2-month mark, a kiosk is more cost effective than an agent. While we fully understand this might not be our final solution, we wanted to keep this in mind as we were going through the problem.
Now, solving this actual problem, we used operations research using an Excel add-on called Solver. And with this, we found our objective function being the total amount of staff, which we wanted to minimize to reduce the wait times completely. And with this, our changing variables would be the number of agents, the number of kiosks, and a few things to make this solver complete was adding the constraints as well as having the peak hour utilization, room check-in rates, and overall capacity of each agent and kiosk. And for this, we used a non-linear model as it is a non-linear problem.
Now, some of those constraints we had to think about in the solver was having at least one number of agents at the front desk at all times. This is because for those complex problems, people prefer the face-to-face interactions to solve those complex problems instead of having nobody there and having to solve it on their own. And then for the peak hour utilization, between 0.8 and 85% was the good medium we found to not have an overload amount of work, but not an under amount. So where they're having just about amount of work at all times.
Going over some of the givens that were given to us in the prompt, we used those values to calculate some of the key data statistics that we needed to solve some of our problems. So the normal occupied rooms takes the total 300 rooms and multiplied by the occupancy rate, and that gives us 255 rooms that are occupied on average. The kiosk service rate came out to about 30 check-ins an hour. That's double the amount that a normal desk agent could. The normal number of guests per day that will be coming through the lobby and checking in is about 383 guests. That's important for figuring out how many people we need to account for in the cafe, with sales and things like that. Our check-ins during peak, during the 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. window, about 217 people will be checking in, and in the off-peak hours, about 38 people will be checking in. And when you divide this number by 3, that's about 73 people coming per peak hour, and that's the number that we use to solve most of our equations to make sure our kiosks and our desk agents were able to accommodate all of them.
Now, continuing the analysis, we had to decide on agent capacity and kiosk capacity as we had to define how many they can actually check in per hour. That way our total capacity of 90 still met the 73 checking in per hour, which would give our peak utilization overall to 80%, which is really good for efficiency, as it's not them doing nothing while they're not being overloaded if something were to happen in the future.
In addition to the solver, we also went through different combinations of agents and kiosks, and we settled on the 2 agents and 2 kiosks, and that comes out to, they can handle 90 check-ins per hour when combined in this way. And that will accommodate for most days when factoring in like how booked the hotel will be. The average is about 85, but it could be 100% booked some days. And the spread of people coming in during the peak hours can change. So if everyone comes in during those 3 peak hours and the hotel's 100% booked, there could be a lot of people, about 100 people per hour coming in to check in, and that will not accommodate some of these combinations. But using our 2-2 combination, it will accommodate 90 check-ins per hour, which will accommodate most days, most normal days and busy days. And down the road, if it ever becomes a problem and these aren't covering enough, we can always add another kiosk.
So yeah, after all of our calculations and analysis, we came up to the hybrid design, which was the kiosk/agent model, having 2 agents and 2 kiosks. Some customers will prefer the human-to-human interaction, so we did have one to involve some agents. And for more of the business guests, they will probably prefer more of the more efficient and cheaper side. And then we wanted to have one concierge to answer some questions that some guests may have.
Now moving to the cafe analysis, we overall found that the percentage of guests going to the cafe during check-in, we assumed it was around 50%. So during the peak check-in hours, only about 50% of those guests would actually go to the cafe. Using those results, we found that the cafe guests during peak hours would be around 163 people, and that is a total revenue of around $1,000 per day in a typical environment. And for these guests per hour, we have around 55 guests being there per hour. And using that calculation, we can find the amount of staff that we need for the cafe during the peak hour would be around 3 staff members.
Similar to Eli's point, we figured since this is a hotel that a lot of people would be coming down in the mornings for breakfast, and we were not given that there would be a complimentary breakfast, so we assumed that this would be the main source of breakfast for our guests. And about 211 guests would be coming down in the morning, and that's 43 guests per hour. The cafe will turn a profit of about $1,300, and the staff needed to cover those people is about 3.
Now going through this, we had to accommodate through off-peak hours, and these off-peak hours would be from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m., and we had to decide if we wanted the cafe to be open during that time, so we ran an analysis. And with this analysis, we have the guests during off-peak would be around 17 guests, meaning that of the 255 rooms, only 17 of those guests would be coming to the cafe, which would average around $103 per period. So we ultimately decided that we will not be opening the cafe during these times, as it would not be the most efficient solution.
So to conclude all of that beverage and food talk, here's our food and beverage strategy. So to increase revenue in the lobby, we're gonna have a cafe that has hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Because we know those leisure travelers will want that face-to-face human interaction, more specialized interaction. But we also realize we might have some business travelers that want a fast and reliable system, and they can grab it and get out the door quickly. So we also want, along with the cafe, implement a grab-and-go option that's attached to the cafe for those customers that want a quick service, don't really care about talking to a person. And that will also be open same hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we expect that the cafe will be used more during breakfast, and that grab-and-go will be more used during afternoon, maybe like that check-in period when they want to check in, grab a snack, and go to their room.
And to dive more into our cafe style, for 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. is our breakfast. That's be more of our specialty foods like custom biscuits, bagels, and stuff like that. And after breakfast ends, we'll have our bakery, which is open from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. This would be more of our easy items like our muffins, croissants, danishes, and and we'll also have cookies and cakes available to guests as well. And for our staff members, we'll have 3 during our peak breakfast hours and 3 during our peak check-in hours to accommodate for those high busy times for our guests. And then we did want to have at least 2 during our non-busy times, because 11 to 2 p.m. we may have some checkouts. People some guests maybe that want to check out our cafe as well. So we wanted to accommodate for that as well.
Now, to summarize everything, how many guests we need to process per hour during the peak hours? As we said, that has to be around 17 parties. And how many kiosks and agents do we need? We decided on 2 kiosks and 2 agents at the front desk.
And to put it all together, we put some lobby visuals together. This is our kiosk that we thought might look like, our check-in and check-out options, and then a spot for the room key to pop out. This would be so that the guests wouldn't have to go through the line for the agent's desk. They wouldn't have to get into another line once running through the kiosk. That wouldn't be any efficient at all. And then we have our 2 agents at the front desk, of course, and then we have our cafe style as well.
Any plan will have its holes and its problems, so here we tried to foresee some of the possible bottlenecks that could happen. Just in general, if the arrivals are greater than the amount of people the kiosks and agents are able to accommodate, a line will begin to form, and that's what we're trying to solve. So it's what we don't want, but something that could cause that, if guests for some reason prefer the front desk agents over the kiosks, say some like older generations might like the more personal inner communications, and they might lean towards the front desk, and that might skew the lines a little bit and cause an imbalance in the lines. People might be waiting in the check-in lines to just ask simple questions. For this, we have the concierge, so we would need to post signage and tell guests or direct guests to them to keep them out of the check-in lines and make sure that that line is purely for check-ins and to keep it flowing. And if a kiosk is out of order, then that will put significant strain on the entire system, because a kiosk lets about 30 people through an hour, and that would
All those people would now be going to the check-in line.
yeah, all those people would now be going to the front desk check-in lines, and the line would start to form.
So to measure our success and to track whether it is successful or not, we wanted to have some guest feedback to know that if everything was going well. So we had the guest feedback for our post-survey questions for our check-in kiosk screen, as well as our post-payment plan and experience for the cafe. And so that way we'll know if everything is meeting the standards, if they liked everything, that stuff like that. And we're also, we plan to conduct some time studies in the lobby to make sure that check-ins are being efficient, everything's in a timely manner, and everything is being efficiently done.
One of the things we were tasked with in the prom is to talk about some potential change of guest type that the hotel may and predicts they will experience. And that change of guest type is from kind of more leisure travel to business travel. And we believe that our hybrid option will be efficient and effective with more business travelers. And with our digital kiosk options, as well as our grab-and-go options at our cafe area. And maybe during that business travel, once we shift to more business travel, we might even go to 1 agent and 3 to 4 kiosks, which is why if we're looking towards more business travel, maybe during this renovation, while we're putting up money, while we're renovating the lobby itself, it might be beneficial, and we would recommend the discussion of adding that 3rd kiosk now in preparation for the future. Just a consideration we would recommend for people making that decision. And then as the clientele moves to more of that fast grab-and-go style, we moved from the cafe to more of that grab and go and really focus in on that type of purchase to help that business traveler.
And here is where we cited our sources for the cost analysis. The first one is the minimum wage in Florida, which is where we're assuming our hotel is. And the second one is the average cost of a digital check-in kiosk.
And finally, we would like to thank you and the Disney Industrial Engineering team for tasking us with this case study. We had a great time solving problems and going through the tasks that we had to solve and going through that problem-solving process. And did you find all the hidden Mickeys? If not, try to go back and find them.